Welcome, friends. Thanks for being with us. This is Labor Day in the U.S., September 2nd, and we're here with Dr. Gabriel Cousens, who we were talking before the show started, and he's got some ideas about trust and the situation in humanity and the world altogether at large that are going to be relevant to everybody's life. So let's dive into it in the short time we've got, and welcome, Dr. Cousens.
Okay, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Doug, behind the scenes. And blessings and love to everyone. And happy Labor Day. Not to belabor the point, but relationship is really key. And so we'll dance a little bit, get the spiritual joy going, and I invite you all to dance with me. And then we'll kind of begin talking about relationship. Now we'll go into meditation for a little bit. So, meditation, if you don't have to do it, you just repeat a mantra. The mantra we use is the name of God, it's grace. Yod and in-breath, hey, and out-breath, Wa and in-breath, and out-breath. Yod from the base up to the heart, hey, out to the heart. Wa from the base up to the third eye, and hey, out to the heart. And you just keep repeating that until you go quiet. You're in meditation. So, the other part is focusing the energy comes from my eyes, and that can help awaken the spiritual energy, or also known as the Kundalini. Within 3 minutes, So we come out of meditation. And we'll come back to it. So, the topic for today is relationship. We kind of look around the world and you see, does anybody trust anybody? Does any nation trust any other nation? Does anyone in the U.S. trust the politicians? When the story changes every few hours almost? Do agreements, like, Russia made a Minsk agreement with NATO, and the agreement was that they would stay away from the Russian borders. They'd stay out of Ukraine, and then Ukraine would never be part of NATO. U.S. just broke all those agreements. How can you have healthy international relationships when you can't honor your agreements and you can't honor your treaties? Not possible. Okay, so that's what's happening internationally. And what about nationally? And we have the same sort of issues. Can you trust what any of the major politicians are really saying? They're really promising. Okay? That's another level. And then we go back, the next level, it's family. Where do people learn not to trust each other? And, family. We have the story, according to Biden's daughter, that her dad would take nude showers with her. She doesn't remember if there was any sexual inappropriate, but she kind of sensed there was. But the point is, how do you have trust? How do you have a trust between, the daughter and the father, or between male and female and male? When that kind of activity, the models are in the family. How do we possibly have healthy relationships? And takes it down to what I call the interpersonal relationships between two people, and the issue of what we call intimacy. And we look at divorce rates about 50% now. People can't even trust what gender they are. Even the biological realities are not trustable. But in intimacy, which is fundamental to healthy human life, you need to trust. Without trust, no intimacy. And you need to take certain risks. You need to trust that that other person is going to hurt you. You need to trust that the love that's being talked about is real. Now, in the process of intimacy, it's best to go slow. If people go too fast in intimacy, it crosses the intimacy trust barrier. So it's better to go slow and slowly build up that trust. And that's the key. If you're talking about relationships, you really want to be talking about intimacy in that the process of building trust needs to be respected. And that's why I go like this, not like that. And then like that. And that's a very real thing. People, they move in together and suddenly they have all kinds of trouble. Why? Why? Because it's closer than they're ready for. And so people pick arguments, they do this and push it back. So regulating your intimacy process rather than idealizing it is a very important thing. And when I say about idealizing it, people say, well, it just should be this way. Everything should work right. We should do this. We should be like this. But the human reality is, because it's what's happening in the world today, in families, the intimacy should be here until it can become and be here. And slowly, 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 this will come together. But that's the healthy way for it to work, not the idealized way that we're automatically into. And of course, when we're talking about, we're not talking way beyond sexual intimacy. We're talking about physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual intimacy. Where you slowly, slowly learn to trust. And so I use the word slow because that's more accurate. Now, in relationships, it helps to have the same values and the same lifestyle, because it's easier to trust a person who's already in that same life experience. That's another factor. And not to idealize the love that has to be full on right away. If it looks like this is a growing situation and you want to grow in it, slowly you grow in it. And you share your life experiences. Then you build up trust. Trust is a big thing. And again, what's missing in the world on the international play, on the world stage, how many people trust in the world order, that it's working for the best for people? Or even that there is, people don't even know if there is a new world order, but there's that much distrust, but, there apparently is. And we learn not to trust it because it doesn't seem to be motivated by the best interests of the masses. It's not like some kind of surprise. Has it ever been that the rulers are motivated by the best interests of the masses? No. There are a few exceptions to that in history. By and large, that's the way it generally is. And generally, we're looking at the ruling, the people in the ruling class, that they don't trust each other. So you have all these fights in the families or among, this leadership group and that leadership group. And because everybody is coming not from the highest good, but from what will most benefit their ego structure and their own personal goals, which they put above the goals of the collective energy. So everything is mirroring everything else, from the great international, not trusting the, quote, people who want to be leaders without even being elected, and then nations not trusting each other, and then people within nations not trusting each other. And it's all about ego. It's all about people not willing to honor the validity of the other person and their own growth. And so those are some of the issues that we're facing massively throughout the society of the world. That's what I'm speaking about. So I'm going to ask Richard if he wants to add anything to this.
I totally agree with you, Gabriel, and it's a question of where the lack of trust is coming from. And I think it's coming from experience. You know, when people see, like you mentioned, the agreement with Russia and Ukraine, when things are not honored, then that becomes the negative experience and it leads to lack of trust, expecting the same outcome that the pattern has been leading toward. And it's the same in personal relationships. And it's the lack of values that is precipitating the whole thing. But where does that come from? You know, values can't just be memorized. They don't hold that way. It's got to come from experience. And as with everything else, it comes down to the connection between ourselves, who we really are, and where we came from. And when that connection is lost, then there's nothing left to trust. So getting it back becomes the whole issue, it seems to me.
Yeah, and where do we learn it? Where do we learn trust? We learn it in the family. We learn that you have to trust. There has to be a trust between the child and the parent. That the parents are really working for the highest good of the child.
Right. An example of that, extreme example of that, is before birth. The child is totally helpless and being developed, and the being is there overseeing the construction of a new body for the experiences that they want. And it's assumed that both parents will take that seriously and protect the child as it constructs its new body. And when that's broken, that speaks to the point of civilization that we're at right now. It needs to be healed.
Right. So the family is the model, but the society affects the model of the family. So if nobody's trusting each other there, it kind of comes down to family not trusting each other. And then men don't trust women, and women don't trust men, and it goes on and on. But it isn't really about men and women. It's more primal than that. It's this human organism, that human organism, can they trust each other to work for each other's mutual benefit and spiritual growth? And so what's the point? We're on the planet to grow spiritually. Is the other person part of that spiritual growth happening for you? And do they commit to that?
And what's our real connection to each other? If you think that you're separate beings and it doesn't matter what happens to the other person, then again, there's no basis for trust.
Right. So we have to seal our oneness. Now, it can happen at different levels. We had in college, I was captain of an undefeated Amherst College football team. What had to be built up was trust. What's the trust? I mean, to make a team gel, people really need to trust that the other person's trying the hardest to do their job. It's not a deep, relationship trust, but there is relationship there, and there has to be a oneness. Why do I pick the football example? Because it's more gross. Okay? There has to be a certain level of oneness in the process to build the trust, even for playing football. More so in a relationship. To really have intimacy, there has to be an unbroken trust. And that's a hard thing in the world today, but that's really what we're talking about. We have to reinstill that value. And again, it comes from family. What do we see in families? We see families, a lot of broken families, in multiple levels. We see teacher, student. Can you trust a teacher when they're trying to put their political agenda on you and not really teaching you? How does that work? I mean, kids are not stupid. They do get when somebody's laying a trip on them. And it breaks down the whole trust thing, because then you see, oh, the teacher's not working for my benefit. They're trying to propagandize me to buy their trip as part of their social political belief system. So these are really important things. Now, these are things I faced, or hardly any kids faced in the 40s and 50s, early 50s. The teachers were just kind of pretty plain. They may have had their trips, but there wasn't a political agenda that anyone was aware of, including the teachers. Yes, everybody has an agenda there, but I mean a more specific kind of propagandized agenda. So how do you trust the teacher who's, quote, teaching you, but really trying to politicize you? It breaks down in that level. So, like, a really important issue. In terms of the, how we interact, how we look at people who are our teachers. What's their agenda? Is it a clean agenda? Is their agenda to uplift me, or is their agenda to use me in different ways? These are kind of questions we ask. And of course, the same thing happens in a relationship. And part of it, and this is what you kind of were hinting at, Richard, is the heart-to-heart connection.
Right, and especially with yourself, because a lot of times if you're looking for fulfillment through the other person, it's a setup to start feeling bad toward them because they can't provide what you should have provided for yourself.
Right. What's really important is that so the trust also begins, well, I'll say it a different way. Trust also begins when you admit that, I can't fulfill your needs, love to, and work towards it, but I don't want to pretend I'm somebody that I'm not. That automatically, in most cases, lays a kind of field of trust in the picture. Because there's been honesty there. You have to have honesty. You have to have trust. You have to take risks, and you have to have that honesty and that heart. And then in that, particularly in relationship, there has to be a certain amount of love, because when people feel love for each other, they're more likely to trust each other. Of course, it can be abused. This is the problem. Humans are complex. But so it's important to find someone who shares the value system of trust and intimacy in a real way. And that's harder and harder to find for men and women in the world today. As I read about it and hear about it, I'm very fortunate. I'm in a very, really, really, really good relationship. And that fundamental trust is there. It's a quarter of a century already. So it's okay. The trust is there. It builds over time. It gets tested over time. And that's strong. So part of what I'm saying is, on day one of a relationship, you're not going to have the same level of trust. It's unrealistic to think that level of trust is the same as it's going to be 25 years later.
Right.
Trust has to be earned over time. And that's an important factor that people need to understand, too. We don't, it doesn't come to an absolute, like, whoa, I trust you, done. It doesn't work that. You have to be tested in trust. You have to go through the trial of fire as a team.
So you're not saying that the ideal is just to trust everybody?
No. Well, and it's a really good point you're making, you know. As the Sufis say, trust everybody, love everybody, but Michael Campbell. So the ideal isn't at all to blindly trust everyone. The ideal is to open up the door for trust in the relationship and let people go through the different challenges to keep testing the trust until you've reached, you know, different levels of trust that works for you. That is different than an idealized, oh, we're just trusting of each other. It doesn't work that way. You know, we can start with a general good feeling. Okay, that's good. But a general good feeling is not the same as an intimate good feeling. That's why I brought up the football team example. Like, you know, it's intimate. We trust each other that person's going to is seriously going to do their assignment, and they're going to block this way, and I'm going to block that way, and we'll open a hole. There's a trust there at that level. And you trust that you care for each other, and you don't want each other to get hurt. That's a level of trust. I wouldn't call it intimacy per se, but it definitely is trust. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand there's all these different levels, but it all comes from consciousness of the individual, right?
Well, it comes from the oneness. The why I use the metaphor of the football team, not really a metaphor, is you're all one. A winning team is all one.
Right. No, that's a very good point.
It's a bunch of stars doing their own thing.
It's not just because the other team members are protecting you. It's because you actually care about them. Yes,
you care. And, you know, at the level of taking each other, you know, when I was in college, you know, I was fortunate to have a car, and after football practice, we'd go up to have the dinner, and, you know, people would sit in the car, people would sit on the top of the car, in the front of the car, and the whole team would be going up on the car, if you get what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Not but, you know, 10 people sitting on the hood of the car in the back, and say, but there's a trust in there. There's a playfulness where I'm going to drive carefully, I'm going to drive slowly, and it's safe because he wants us to be not to get injured. You know, and then everybody kind of eats together. That's a level of trust. It's not intimacy, though. Intimacy is another level of trust, where you're revealing your inner self, you know, to the other person. Your inner self is bare and open, and you trust that they will not hurt you. That's very important. It's fundamental, actually, for relationships. For a deep relationship, you really have to trust that person's not going to hurt you. And that is a very fundamental and important question. You got to know you're not going to get hurt. And then you can be your real self. And it's in relationship, people have the opportunity to be their real self because you slowly reveal yourself, and you see the other person is going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt you. And that's part of the intimacy process. That's different than the football thing, okay? Part of the intimacy process. You know, interpersonal relationships. You reveal more and more your vulnerabilities, and you feel more and more safe revealing your vulnerabilities because you know that person's not going to take advantage of it.
Right. So what you're talking about trust between people that care about each other and that live up to their responsibilities. What about the spiritual ideal of loving everybody? How does that fit in?
Well, it's a good question. You want to love everybody, but you have to, again, I'll go back to the soup. You love everybody, but tie up your camel. loving everybody is a general openness to people. It's a general heart openness to people. Okay? But it's not specific. They're not revealing their vulnerabilities. They're not, taking deep emotional risks with you. So loving everybody in a general way is okay. It's fine. There's really no risk in that. Okay? You're not making a business deal and someone's going to steal money. You just love everybody. It doesn't cost you anything. It's only a positive thing. And so that's that level that we're talking about. It's good to love everybody, but we also know over time, love everybody, but this person just bit you and that person just stabbed you in the back. So you take a risk there in some of that. But your risks aren't high level, or they shouldn't be high level. Does that answer your question? Because it's a good question.
Yeah, I think so. It's also based on an understanding that this is a long topic, but when the people that are playing the roles of the bad guys right now, in various ways and different levels, everywhere from malevolent leaders of countries to untrustable individuals in daily life, where that's coming from is not who they really are. Where that's coming from is mind programs. And there's still spirit underneath. It's just that it's not acting in consciousness. It's deceived by the mind programs. And so it reminds me of that saying in the Bible, forgive them because they know not what they do. On the surface they know, but if they really knew, they would never do it because it's not who they are.
I think there's limits to that. Like, really what we're talking about in general, like the healthy relationships are certain boundaries. Boundaries are important. So, you love everybody, but you don't make yourself necessarily vulnerable until you get to know them.
Right. Strategic defense.
In general, you love everybody, and you're open-hearted, and you're kind. You meet somebody on the street, you're kind, and then they fall down, you little lady falls down, you pick them up. That's kindness, lovingness. But then it gets deeper, then there's more level issues of trust. And so all that has to be appropriate to the situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say, the loving for everybody is on a deep spiritual understanding level of who they really are.
Yeah, we're all one. We're all one. We're all one.
Right.
So we have that.
On the everyday action level, you take defensive action when necessary. You don't let yourself be run over.
Right. And then we get the intimacy, another level of that.
Right.
You take risk, you open up. There's all levels of trust, risk, in the relationship. And that's how you learn and define who is it you can more intimately trust, more generally trust.
And you encourage awakening in other people by having it in yourself.
Yes. If you show, it's a chain reaction. If you show love and thoughtfulness to other people, it can rub off on them and inspire them.
Right. It's the same thing between countries. You don't force good behavior in other countries. It doesn't work. But if you're an example, then they can follow.
They have the option to follow, yeah. And that's exactly right. That's why I started, on the macro level, but it comes down to the personal. But the principles are exactly the same.
Right.
Okay, so this is a super important topic because it's a topic that everyone in the world is dealing with today. At every single level. So we need to work on individual, intimate relationships and start valuing that is something that goes beyond TikTok, okay? And family relationships and social relationships and national relationships, all those levels really require the same mechanism, but at different levels.
So what's the bottom line lesson?
Say it again, please.
What's the bottom line lesson in the whole thing?
The bottom line lesson, good question, that will be our last question, is it's very important to open your relation, to start a relationship with an open heart, but be very thoughtful as you're risk-taking with each other, and you slowly build. Trust has to be built. You can't say, let's just trust each other. No. Trust has to be built. Intimacy has to be built. And you start with an open heart and then keep moving in the direction of more and more intimacy. And you're constantly testing yourself and the other person in the process. That's just part of the process of being human. So that's the bottom line.
Okay.
But it's fundamental for being human, for being a healthy human. Relationship is part of what it means to be a healthy human, is to be in healthy relationships. So may everybody be blessed that we take the message of keeping an open heart that allows the potential for healthy relationships with all different levels. Amen.
Thank you, Gabriel. We're pretty much on time actually today. And really important to realize that we're in relationships with everybody all the time. We're in a network. And it reminds me of something that one of the incredible newscasters, Alex Jones, has said. The reason you care about what happens to somebody else, and this is not a criticism of him, it's just a divergence of opinion. He says the reason you care about what happens in another country or to somebody in another place is because it will happen to you next. And I'm saying that's a misunderstanding. The reason you care about what happens to somebody else is because we're all family members. We're intimately connected with everybody. And what happens to others is happening to us. It's a reflection on the outside. So you can use that to your benefit by having good intent toward everybody, including the bad guys, hoping that they wake up. And when you do that, you're having it toward yourself, and everybody benefits.
So, in all due respect to Alex, I think what he's also saying is, if we reach a point of trust and goodness with each other, that will benefit all of us.
Absolutely.
So if we create goodness and trust, then we all will benefit. And if somebody double crosses you, which is kind of what he's thinking about, then be a little careful, because it could happen to you if they're double crossing someone else. So he's talking about levels of trust and a little bit more externally.
Right.
But you look around, how did this person act to that person? Well, they double crossed them. Oh, well, I'm not sure I want to be in a relationship with that person. You see what I mean? I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt of saying, if you get hurt where you are, that concerns me, because it could also happen to me, because people are not trustworthy.
Yeah, it's correct. It's just that there's a deeper level, and that what happens to other people is happening to us at the same time.
Yes. In a cosmic way, so absolutely. But we got to start with the simple. Treat each other nicely, respect each other, open your heart to the other person, giving them the opportunity to open their heart to you. Right,
and be defensive when as needed, as appropriate.
Yes, that's what you have to be on your toes to see what happens.
Right.
Okay, so I want to thank you for your good job, and really Lost Arts Radio and Doug, behind the scenes. We trust you. You're good. You make it happen. So thank you. And everyone who's listening. Blessings to you.
Thank you, Gabriel. And I want to remind everybody to remember the weekly World Peace Meditation, which is an exercise in actually using the intent to harmony with all the relationships around the world. And Dr. Cousens programs at drcousens.com and treeoflife.mn.co, and Planetary Healing Club, which is still going on, at planetaryhealingclub.com. And the main thing is that you're in relationship with everybody all the time, and what you're putting out has great power. It's all based on that. It's not visible on the outside right away, but it's powerful, and we've got clues to show that it's true. So make good use of it. Value your time. Watch what emotional field you're walking around in, and know that it's affecting everybody else, and it has great power. So thanks for being here. We appreciate you so much, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.